Hey folks, I'm Jonathan. Welcome to the workshop. Today our project is to upgrade this workbench. Now don't get me wrong, this is actually a phenomenal workbench. It's got a lot of really nice features. For example, it's easy to put work holding on it, it's height adjustable. However, there are a couple problems. For one, it's not all that rigid. And if I'm being totally honest, it's not the prettiest thing either. So let's give ourselves an upgrade. Alright, so before getting too far into the glamour shots of sawing and chiseling and whatnot, let me show you the design that I came up with, and that'll give you a lot more context on what's going on. So here's what I came up with in Fusion 360. I tried to keep the design as simple and beginner friendly as possible because I am not a good woodworker and I'm probably going to screw this up pretty badly. In all, it's made up of 12 different pieces and the cuts are pretty simple to do. Okay, so this is the basic structure that gives the workbench its shape. So basically it's 3 stringers and 2 aprons that are notched to fit in to each other. And I'm also going to be adding construction adhesive and screws to make sure that my mistakes are covered up well and that this thing is still strong. So this is a local wood known as copal. It's very cheap and it's very strong, and I actually kind of like the way that it looks once it's all finished. But I think it'll be a really good material because it's tough. So it should be good for a workbench. One thing I gotta watch out for though is that the grain can be a little wavy on this wood. So I was getting a fair bit of tear out, mostly because I'm really inexperienced with the plane, and if there's a way to screw it up, I will. So this is a way that I found to be easier for me anyway, is that if I made the cutouts in the notches a little bit undersized and then came back with a hand plane to thin down the piece that fits in it, I could work a lot faster, and it was a lot easier to use the hand plane than it was to fit the chisel in this large area and still end up with nice, straight, smooth edges. From there, I just added a little bit of construction adhesive and screwed it together, and it seemed pretty solid to me. Then I just clean up the edges. And these are the planks for the top. I'm trying to do some jointing here. I was considering doing a glue up to get it totally seamless, but that didn't go as planned, so I went with close enough. So I was adding tons of construction adhesive, and then I screwed the top planks down. Now the stuff that I'm using for the legs of the workbench, it's called blue gum eucalyptus, and usually it's a little bit of a junk wood. You'll use it in pallets or some cheap flooring. But it's really strong and really hard, and I think it'll fit this application well. It's just not the prettiest. So because the blue gum eucalyptus likes to split, I need to pre-drill before all of my screws. And it really didn't take much to totally lock these legs in. And I think that part of the reason for that is that the aprons are so deep. So I've got really good leverage on these legs, keeping them rigid. I was actually thinking about adding some gussets or some reinforcements, but I really didn't need to at all. This is just a really strong design with these deeper aprons. So I did a quick sanding on the top, mostly to remove my gouges and screw-ups from planing, and I added some linseed oil to the top to protect the wood. And you really get to see some of the pink tones that come out with this wood and some of the interesting patterns that I thought was cool anyway. All right, so next thing's next. It's time to turn this work table into a workbench. And to do that, I'm going to add some work holding. One thing that I found that was super cool is this vise screw, which is made for things like leg vices for woodworking, for woodworking benches. I don't know why that was so hard to say. Normally these things are like 50 bucks, but I picked this thing up for 25, so I was pretty happy about that. So I'm gonna make a leg vise to go right here on the side of this workbench and get this thing all mounted up and installed. So to do the leg vise, I'm just using some leftover pieces of copal that I was using for the rest of the structure. And I didn't design this, I just kind of stuck things together and did what felt right for me. So it kind of took me a little while to come up with something that I was happy with, but I got there in the end.
This glue up wasn't really the cleanest because the wood is bowed a little bit, and I do have a pretty ugly glue line on one side, and I'm really not a woodworker, so I don't really know what I'm doing here. And then I didn't want this thing just looking like a giant block of wood, so I just started carving out some extra pieces, trying to come up with something that looked a little less clunky. Now, because I didn't really have a design that I was working to, this took me a while of just messing around with it, but I was also having fun with the chisel and my tools, so I didn't mind at all. Now, the grain on this wood is a little bit wavy in some areas, so it was a little bit tricky to work with at times, but as long as my chisels were razor sharp, for the most part it went okay.
All right, so it took a really long time to get the shape that I was happy with, but eventually I came up with this. I just went for really smooth, round edges, just so when you bonk yourself on it, it doesn't hurt too much. And then I sanded it with 80 grit. I'm not going to go any further because this is a tool, right? This is not really a showpiece that I'm making, and it's good enough. So next thing to do here is I want to mount it up against the leg. So to do that, I need to drill holes for this vise screw to go through. Now, measuring it, unfortunately, does not match up well with the bit that I have. Ideally, I would want a Forstner bit for this. I don't have one. I have a 1-inch spade bit. And then I have this hole saw that came from a $3 set. It is the size that I want. This is pretty thick for a hole saw to get through. So my idea here, I'm going to start drilling with the hole saw, get the pilot in there, get it seated on there, and then kind of switch back and forth between that and this 1-inch spade bit to remove the core. And if that works properly, that should mean that I should be able to just keep on going till I'm through. I haven't tried it yet, so I don't know if it's going to work or not, but one way to know for sure, hey?
That's one thing that I like about the design of this table is that it's really easy to get clamps all around. So even though I don't have the leg vise installed yet, it's very easy to hold my work. Like I can clamp to the apron as easily as I can to the tabletop.
Oh, right on. Okay, so next I got to transfer this position onto the leg.
So this hole took a little bit longer than I thought it would, but I did get through it. So in the end, I win. And protecting it with a bit of linseed oil. And you can see my glue line there that is really not so great. If I was smart like other YouTubers, I would have angled the camera another way because that's the one spot where I have a problem and it's pretty noticeable. But I think that it should be fine because vices are always under compressive load. So I'm not too worried about this thing opening up or failing in some way. It should be fine. All right, there we go. So that's pretty much a functional workbench right there. That's about as far as I'm going to take it for this video. In the future, what I want to do is, this is just kind of like a temporary fix right now. You need something to counter the leg vise from twisting as you're clamping something up here. So I just made these 2 wedges, and I can sort of kick them in or out to make whatever gap I need there for whatever I'm working on. There's a couple different ways of getting that to stay straight, so that's a future video. And then the only other things that I did that I like for features here, I added some 1-inch holes here where I can put some dowel rod or something in there as a plane stop. And I also put some 1-inch holes here, so if I'm working on some longer pieces, I can support it on this dowel, and that'll keep it steady for me if I'm doing something like some edge planing or something like that. But otherwise, this is a really solid table. I was thinking of adding supports on the bottom to the legs, but so far I haven't needed it. I can always add them later. Probably won't, but for the amount of work this took, I'm pretty happy with it.